deceive, mislead, swindle, outwit, fool, delude, rob, defraud, not play fair, play a practical joke on, victimize, betray, beguile, take advantage of, entrap, ensnare, hoodwink, dupe, fleece, con, skin, sucker, string along, to screw out of, that's literally in here, do in, to lead astray, to bamboozle, to cross up, to bilk, to gouge, clip, fake, jip, put on, burn, sell out, chisel, double cross, shake down, make a sucker out of, keep going, to take to the cleaners, to take for a ride, to snow, put over on, or put one over on, take in, pull the wool over somebody's eyes, flim flam, give someone the runaround, to do a snow job on, to play on, to stack the cards, or to make a monkey out of. My personal favorite. Well, he made a monkey out of me. In Webster's New World, it's a pocket thesaurus. All the words that could be used in place of deceit, or deceive, or bamboozle, or to make a sucker out of. Remember the sermon series we're going through. Today we're talking about deceiving, lying, conniving. I could come up with more words, but we're gonna keep on going. We could be here all day. The previous 2 weeks we spent time talking about Judah. And the first week we talked about responsibility and how the lack of responsibility is really not a good thing for us Christians. And yet last week we talked about how we shouldn't say something that we have no intention on following through with. Being someone who is a person of their word. This week we're going to talk about deceiving. And we need to understand that as we pick up in verse 12, the time between 11 and 12 has been a while. We're going to read that here in verse 12. I'm going to read Genesis 38, 12 through 23. And where I cut off is going to seem to be an odd place, but I can't go any further without getting into next week's sermon. So we're stopping right where we're stopping at verse 23 for a reason today. Verse 12. It says, after a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had finished mourning, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went up to Timnah to the sheep shearers. Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's clothes, veiled her face, covered herself, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had grown up, she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He went over to her and said, come, let me sleep with you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, what will you give me for sleeping with me? I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he replied. But she said, only if you leave something with me until you send it. What should I give you? He asked. She answered, your signet ring, your cord, and the staff in your hand. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she got pregnant by him. She got up and left, and then removed her veil and put her widow's clothes back on. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get back the items he had left with the woman, he could not find her. He asked the men of the place, where is the cult prostitute who is beside the road at Enaim? There has been no cult prostitute here, they answered. So the Adullamite returned to Judah, saying, I couldn't find her. Furthermore, the men of the place there said there hadn't been no cult prostitute here. Judah replied, let her keep the items for herself, otherwise we'll become a laughing stock. After all, I did send this young goat, but you couldn't find her. You see, it says it was a long time. After a long time, I even looked that up in the Hebrew to try and discern how long a time this was. It just specifies a really long time. Okay, and we can kind of gather that from the surrounding text. It says, after a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, had died. Okay, so Judah's wife is dead. Judah's wife is gone, and when a loved one, moreover a spouse, dies, you go through a period of official mourning. I tried to find how long that actually was. There really isn't any kind of set amount of time that I could find. But you would go through a period of mourning for that spouse. Literally an official period of mourning. And after this had finished, after she had died, after he had mourned for her, he and his friend Hira, and this guy is an Adullamite, he said they went up to Timnah. Okay? Now I'm getting a mint. Timnah is that red dot right down, and I doubt you can see it, but Adullam is, you see where Timnah is at, that red dot? It is southeast of there by about, 4 or 5 inches or so. So it's a good distance from there. Now, Enaim is not actually in there. I tried to look it up, but apparently it's somewhere along the road. It's one of those lost cities that we have just no clue about where this is at. But this is the kind of general vicinity that we're talking about, okay? And he says that they went up to the sheep shearers. They take the sheep and, kind of like if you raise sheep here, you have somebody come, if you can't do it yourself, you hire somebody done to come and shear the sheep, right? Because it is actually a very tricky process from what I understand. I've never done it myself, but I know people who have, and it's not easy. And you have to be very careful. So they had somebody specific who would go and shear these sheep, and that's what they were doing. Now, on the way up to Timnah to shear his sheep, he saw a woman on the side of the road. Now, this was Tamar. Tamar had gotten wind by somebody that Judah was going up there to shear sheep. And she's like, well, Shayla's grown up, and I still don't have a husband. Judah hasn't made good on his word. My word is my bond. He hasn't made good on that promise yet. Okay? So she concocts a plan to have a son. She's due her rights. She is due to not be a widow the rest of her life, that she would have a son by Shayla. And if he isn't going to give her Shayla, then she's going to get it any way she can. Okay? So she takes off her widow clothes, with more than likely were probably black. Okay? And after she does that, she puts on this prostitute's outfit. Now, when we read prostitute in here, we kind of all get this mental image of boots up to here and a short skirt up to here and, really tight top. And, we have this picture of a prostitute in our mind. Well, this was a little bit different, okay? Prostitution has come a long way. Sorry, it just has. I worked at a casino boat. You have no idea what I've seen. Oh my gosh. And I ran a bar at a Holiday Inn. Yeah. They really are nice people. They just need help. I mean, honestly. They need a lot of help. I mean, they're people like you and me. I remember tending bar. This was so not in the sermon, but I remember tending bar. And these two ladies came over from the Red Roof Inn next door, and they were nice. They were nice ladies. Me, being the naive country boy that I am, had no idea who these people were. So we're just talking back and forth and having a great conversation. As a matter of fact, at this point I had just started going back to church, and after this, one of my guys sitting at the bar, he goes, after the working girls left, that's what he called them, the working girls. And after they had left, he goes, you know who they were, right? Not a clue. And he's like, there were working girls. And I'm like, working girls? And he's like, prostitutes. oh my gosh, are you serious? I'm like, I was just sitting here talking to them. But, that's the point, is they're normal human beings who just need help, you know? That story just kind of, that's always kind of struck a nerve with me, just, it kind of hits home. It puts it real, that no matter who you are, you can fall into things like this deceitful kind of lifestyle. But a cult prostitute is they wouldn't dress up in a getup that we would think of. A cult prostitute would literally cover their veil. They would veil their faces, and they would dress up, because these women would be respectable women within the community. Yeah. They would be respectable women within the community who their religion said it was okay for them to offer themselves to a complete stranger for the one and only fact of religious rites and rituals. They said it was okay. That was the whole point of why they did this. It was part of their religion. These respectable women would go out and offer themselves to complete strangers for a price, and it would be it wouldn't be considered a breach of the marital vows. Did you know that's still practiced today? Yeah, by the Muslims. They call it sexual jihad. Okay? And what happens is these women are sent out, married or not, or younger than 18, and they are sent out to these terrorists who are fighting this jihadic Islamist war to have their babies. And then they come home pregnant with the babies and the children of these jihadists, these warists. This, my friends, is why God tells us not to intermarry with the pagans, because their practices influence us. Okay? Their practices influence us. That's why we're not supposed to intermarry with them. We need to reach them without intermarrying within their culture. And Judah set this up. It is his problem. He is the one who left his family and went off into this lifestyle. It's a serious issue here. Okay? So, he comes along this prostitute that he thinks is a cult prostitute. He has no idea that this is Tamar along the side of the road, because her face is veiled. He can't see her. He has no idea. Okay? Verses 16 to 18, they go through this negotiation of payment. Well, what are you going to give me? Well, I'll give you a goat for my flock. Well, okay, but what are you going to give me until you send that goat? Because he has sheep with him, not goats. Okay? So what are you going to give me? And he says, I'll give you my signet ring, my cord, and the staff in my hand. Now, this signet ring, it's not a ring like you wear on your finger. It's a ring it's a medallion, if you will. It sits on a cord around your neck. And it's usually personalized to either your family or you personally. Okay? And he gave this signet ring to her, and he gave her the staff in his hands. That's what she wanted. Next week, we're going to find out why. But for now's intents and purposes, this was a negotiation of payment. Okay? So she wanted, in contract terms, she wanted a down payment on the real thing. When he delivered the goat, he would get that deposit back. Okay? And after they did the business, she went back to her everyday life. She took off the clothes, and she put back on her widow's clothes, and that was pretty much all there was to it. So this friend of Judah's returns with the payment. He can't find her. He's like, where is she? He has to even ask the people around, where's the cult prostitute that was hanging out at the entrance to the gate out here? We don't know who you're talking about. There hasn't been any cult prostitute here. If Judah had been there, could you imagine the sinking feeling he would have had? Fortunately, it was his servant But his servant comes back and says that he couldn't find her. I'm sure he told him the whole story. And he's like, oh man. You see, because Judah wasn't partaking in the religious rites and rituals, he was taking advantage of the situation. That's why he says right there in verse 23, he says, let her keep the items for herself, otherwise we'll become a laughing stock. He doesn't practice that religion. He was taking advantage of the situation. Ooh, a cult prostitute. Yeah, I mean, no. He wanted to, as the Japanese would put it, he wanted to save face. He wanted to not face that embarrassment. You know, when we live a lifestyle that is not consistent with what God has laid out for us, we end up reaping the consequences. Let me put the dots together for you. Jacob, Judah's father. Jacob was a deceiver. His name literally means deceiver. You see, he was a twin, remember? He and Esau, and Jacob cheated Esau out of his birthright, and then he cheated Esau out of his blessing too. You see, Jacob is a deceiver, so it kind of runs in the family. There are just some things that the generational curse, it's on to the third and fourth generations, and now Judah is in this situation, and he's having the same problem. He's left home, and he's had these two sons that died, and he's like, I promise you that I'm going to give you Shelah when he grows up, but has no intention on following through with it. He's deceiving. He's a liar, in other words. You're a liar, Judah. You had no intention. And not only that, he partakes in the pagan rituals without ever participating in the pagan ritual. He takes advantage of their system. But see, it was... He has deceived Tamar, and now she is repaying the favor. When you sow deception, you're going to reap deception. Because he deceived her. He's like, I'm going to give you Shelah. And he comes back thinking, what if she's the cause of then my two sons dying? My son Shelah might die too. So he's deceiving and he's conniving and he's underhanded and dirty. And she comes back off this after so much time, and she's going, what's the deal? And she concocts this plan to deceive him right back. An eye for an eye. Matthew 6:14 and 15 says that it's actually the tail end of the Lord's Prayer. And Christ there says that we're going to be forgiven our sins if we forgive others. That's a wonderful promise. But it's also a heavy one, too. Because he promises that we can and will be forgiven as we have forgiven others. In other words, it's a conditional thing. If you're not very forgiving to the people who have wronged you, God will not forgive your sin either. It's a conditional response. In order to get that forgiveness, we have to give that forgiveness. It's no different than grace. God gives us the grace that we have through Jesus Christ. It is our responsibility to pass that grace along. Forgiveness is no different. We get the forgiveness from God. It is our duty to pass that forgiveness on. Now, forgiveness is not saying that what somebody did is okay. It takes away the power that has over you. Because when we hold grudges, things like this happen. Tamar couldn't let go of it. You owe me. You owe me. So she concocts a plan. An eye for an eye. We can be forgiven. But there are also natural consequences to our sin that still remain. Denny touched on this a couple of weeks ago after the sermon. I realized why I hadn't gone there yet, because it's coming today. I hadn't put that together yet. But it's all over today's sermon. It's like even though we're forgiven of our sins, there are still consequences to our sins. When we're lying and deceiving and conniving, there are consequences to that. Judah can be forgiven, but there are still consequences to that. The actions that he's taken, this lying, this deceitfulness that he's had, is still out there, and people still want vengeance. Okay? Think of adultery. When a spouse commits adultery, and then they realize it, either they get caught or they realize it, if they are a true Christian, they will be repentant of that, and they will recognize that what they've done is wrong, and they will truly seek forgiveness for that. And the spouse, it usually takes time to forgive that, but it usually does happen, or it can happen. But there's also a natural consequence to that situation that can't be gotten rid of. Number one, they've united themselves with somebody else. You can't undo that. Number two, there is a loss of trust. You lost my trust, Buster. You have to earn it back. If you betray that, you can forgive all you want, but there are still consequences to that behavior. Somebody murders somebody, they will spend the rest of their life in jail. And we've seen it, that people come to faith in prison. Happens all the time. Thank God. But they still have to finish their sentence, don't they? Because there are natural consequences to that sin. There are always consequences. It's the physics rule. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Exactly. Cause and effect, in other words. Okay? So, and I kind of think, I've tossed this one back and forth this week. I've wondered whether or not, are there times when we deceive people on accident? The word deceive kind of connotates this on purpose behavior. But circumstances come up. We promise to do something, and yet something more important comes up. I'll give an example. On Monday, the Monday that Liz was in surgery, went to have surgery on her knee, Phil's mom died that morning. So because I'd had Liz's surgery scheduled for a month, but Barb passed away that morning. That takes precedence. Things come up. Now, I still went to her surgery, but I had to work it around so that I made sure things were right. So, things come up. And that's just an example. So, circumstances come up. So, if I don't necessarily think that's a deceiving, but we need to be conscious of this stuff. We need to be conscious of these things when we make obligations, and we need to make every effort to be honest and true and keep our integrity intact. It's like I said last week, our integrity is the utmost importance to a Christian. We have to have our integrity. Our integrity. Early in 1996, the body of former ambassador to Switzerland was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, America's graveyard of war heroes. His granite tombstone read Seaman First Class, U.S. Merchant Marine. But according to Don Van Netta Jr. and Alain Sciolino in the New York Times on December 11, 1997, cemetery workers hauled the tombstone away and they exhumed the casket. The reason? The man had lied. For years, he told others, he had served on the Coast Guard ship, the Horace Bushnell, during World War II. He said the Germans torpedoed the ship and he had been thrown overboard, sustaining a head injury. In fact, the records show that at the time he was serving in the Merchant Marine, he was actually attending Wilbur Wright College in Chicago. The Coast Guard had no record of his serving in the Merchant Marine, and of course, he had never earned the rank of Seaman First Class. And somehow, his lie was not discovered when the State Department investigated his background, and he was approved as an ambassador. Somehow, his body was permitted to be buried in Arlington National with a tombstone engraved with a lie. But the truth came out, and they revoked it. You see, that's the thing about deception. That's the thing about lying and living this lifestyle, is that what we sow will come out. You know, I tell my kids all the time, I said, if you lie, I will find out. Parents just know. You just have a way of finding this stuff out, don't you? Just the way it is. How do you know that? Oh my gosh. A ladybug. Squirrel. Yeah, squirrel. But, you know, our lies will find us out. I remember when I was 18 years old, I was going to school. I was at the community college majoring in music, and I did my music class as well, but I always managed to skip my core classes. I hated it. English, science, I didn't want to go to the core classes. I went to my music classes, but the other ones were not very good. And that fall, I went off to a different one, and I wasn't going to college, and I was lying to cover up lies. You know, it just kind of snowballs over itself. You know, you tell one lie, and well, why aren't you at school today? Well, blah, 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 you know, whatever the excuse was. I don't even remember now. But, you know, it just kind of keeps snowballing over, and eventually it found itself out. In the spring of '98, I tried to get into the Navy, and I didn't want to tell anybody for some reason. There's no reason to lie about it, but I did. You know, they wouldn't let me in because I have obsessive compulsive disorder at the time. It turned into anxiety, but that's why they didn't accept me, is because this type of stuff usually happens. You can't have somebody in combat that in the middle of combat, you have an anxiety attack. I'm sorry, that's just not going to work. So, you know, I did try to serve my country, but, you know, they rejected me. I was a governmental reject. So, and the guy actually offered to put me in illegally. He wanted to put me in through a different station. He's like, don't tell them about it, and we'll get you. I'll put you in. And I said, no, I can't do that, because it will be found out. Even then, in my unchristianness, I still had, because I'd just gone through it. The lies find you out. This lifestyle of a deceiving lifestyle will find you out eventually. That's why it's the utmost important that we have our integrity. Don't be deceiving. If you need prayer this morning, if you need to give your life for Christ, you know, in the first week of Advent, we're going to talk a little bit deeper about this subject of deceiving. Okay? But don't be deceived by the devil, because he'll do everything he can to tell you you're all right. And then once you're baptized, he'll do everything he can to tear you away and go, you're not good enough. Don't believe the lies. If you've never accepted Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, today is the day. Stand up with us, sing a hymn of invitation. We're going to be singing There's Power in the Blood. And it moves really fast. This one is a quickie. Yes, indeed. So if you need prayer, come forward this morning.